Okay, hello, I am Apocalypse the Geek Guru, and today I'm going to be reviewing, or rather tonight, I'm going to be reviewing The Gilded Age, Season 1, Episode 2, Money Isn't Everything. This episode was absolutely incredible. And you may have noticed I'm not in my room. It's not important. Let's get into this review. So the episode starts out with a title sequence, a beautifully done title sequence, might I add. The way they segued every images into different, things. It was very beautifully done. The music was absolutely incredible. I loved it. But the episode starts out with Mrs. Something or other, starts with a B. I can't remember. The cook of the Van Rhijn house. Now, if you'll remember from my last video, my last review, the Van Rhijns are the old money in New York. Their family has been in New York for over 100 years or whatever. Like, you know, in New York, they have the old money and they have the new money. The old money has uh, been running things since the Mayflower landed. And if you don't know what the Mayflower is, learn some American history. I'm not here to explain that right now. Okay, so the main episode starts out with the cook being assaulted by a man saying that she owes them money, demanding money. So apparently she owes somebody money. And then it goes into, it cuts to Marion Brooks, who, if you remember from episode 1, her father left her nothing but like $30, and she had to go and live with her aunts. And I'm not going to explain this every episode. This is just, the second episode. So I'm just going to go a bit into the first. So it goes to her and her friend Peggy, who was the black woman that helped her get the train fare after her train was stolen. Peggy Stott, I think that's her name. It might be Scott. I might be wrong. I thought it was Stott, but then they said it again and it sounded like Scott. I don't know. Something like that. Stott, Scott, doesn't matter. Peggy. I call her Peggy. We're good friends. So it starts out, then it goes into them. Marion is getting a dress made. She's at the dressmaker's, and Peggy's sitting with her, and they have a little discussion. They talk about something. And then it goes to, she's back home, and she's talking with Aunt Agnes, her aunt, and her Aunt Agnes and Aunt Ada, and Oscar's there, the Freddie Mercury looking dude, and Marion's saying how she likes Gladys, the Russell's daughter, and Agnes is saying how she doesn't like them. She doesn't like the Russells because, again, they're the new money in New York. They're people who didn't I don't know, have a fortune or whatever. They haven't been here for over 100 years, so they're new people, and we don't like new people. That's the mindset of the Van Rhijns. And I love both. I love everybody on this show. They're just so great. They're great characters. I love Agnes Van Rhijn. She's just so pompous. I love it. She's just like, we don't accept the new. We are the old, and it's just great. But so then we go to Mrs. I think that they just said it, Mrs. Bard, and she's sitting there crying, making a salad or something. And her little attendant, she was the one who was prejudiced against Peggy in the first episode. So she's asking we'll just call her Mrs. B for now, because I'm like 95% sure her name starts with a B. So we'll just call the cook Mrs. B. That woman's Mrs. B. She's the cook of the Van Rhijns. Now, so the maid slash cook attendant is asking her, you know, if is anything wrong, because she's sitting there crying, which makes sense because, you know, someone's obviously after her trying to get some money because she owes people money. But, you know, she's like, oh no, why would anything be wrong? And she's all like, oh, I've been chopping onions, you know, this and that. And then we get to the old white lady from the last episode who was real prejudiced against Miss good old Peggy. You can see her there. I'm sorry, but they kind of dimmed the thing for when I pause it. But so she starts going. The old white lady sort of berating her, you know, saying like, "Oh, you think just because Mrs. Van Rhijn has dictated some letters to you that you're some sort of secretary?" And then the good old butler, he's just turning away right there. The good old butler, Bannister, he comes in and he's like, actually, she is a secretary, and that makes her above you, as that puts her above you in the pecking order. And when I heard that, I was like, oh my gosh. Like, I love Bannister. He's great. He's so new age. I love him. Bannister is awesome. And then, and, okay, oh, this look around. Okay, there, the maid, the little maid right there, she was saying how, Oscar Van Rhijn, the dude who, looks like Freddie Mercury, she was saying how he's very handsome, you know, this and that. And okay, here's the thing. As I said in my last video, he has a gay sort of relationship with Mr. Adams, but I don't think he's gay. I think he's bi, because he expressed, not only did he want to kiss his cousin Marion, which I think I said in my last video, like that could have been sort of like a red herring, like, oh, let me try and, you know, throw them off the trail. But no, I think he was genuinely attracted to her, you know. So I think he's bi. Not that it really matters, you know, but for storytelling, I think it will be interesting to see him sort of navigate this sort of 1882, you know, America, you know, where they didn't even like you for the color of your skin, let alone who you wanted to sleep with. I mean, Jesus. You know, so I think it'll be interesting, because in the first episode, he said to Mr. Adams that he wanted to go to the party at the Russell's house. And it's because he wanted to see the girl, but when the daughter, he wanted to see the daughter. Because, but when Mr. Adams asked him, you know, oh, why did you want to why did you want to go to the party? Oh, Oscar was like, oh, it's not important, you know. So I think he's kind of playing, you know, he's kind of playing Oscar. Like I said, I'm sure he's bi, so he's like, I think he's bi, so he's going with Oscar, but he's like still, you know, playing the field with women, and he's very attracted to Gladys Russell, the Russell's daughter, which is great because she's like not even out yet. You know, I think I explained in my last video that women have to like have a party or whatever to sort of announce the fact that they're looking for a husband. So she hasn't even done that yet. So it's really interesting to see. But yeah, so basically the maid is saying that she thought that Mr. Oscar was, you know, attractive. And what is it? Oh, the housekeeper. She's like, oh, it's nothing to do with you, you know. He's only attracted to money or this or that. John. That's the name of the dude's name. I used his face in my the thumbnail for my last video. The dude who was like, that dude, John, that's his name. I always forget it, which is weird. I have an Uncle John, but whatever. So basically, that, you know, then they start serving lunch. She comes in. Marion, Agnes, and Ada, they're all having lunch, and what is it? Oh, the lawyer. That's what he was. The lawyer from the first episode. The guy who was handling all their money and who told her that all she had was $30. I thought he was a banker, but it turns out he's a lawyer. I might have said he might have been a lawyer, but whatever. Doesn't matter. I thought he was a banker or whatever. So she's saying that he's coming into town, which I think I said in my last video that I thought I saw some sparks between them. So basically, he's coming into town, and I don't think I mentioned this in my last video, but he waived his fee. Like, he basically said that you don't have to pay me, which, okay, looking back, that was kind of a clear sign that he was a lawyer. Okay, silly me. Okay, so anyway, Agnes was saying that, hey, we're gonna invite him to tea. He didn't make you pay, so we're gonna be courteous and not, and bring him in and say hi to him and whatever. So, and Marion's like, is that really necessary? And Agnes is like, oh, well, he waived his fee, so yeah, we're gonna be kind to him, and this and that. Oh, sorry. And then Marion says that she's going to run a stall at the bazaar for the charity. And for anyone who doesn't know what a bazaar is, it's basically just like a little market. They're gonna have like a little market stalls and stuff like that for this charity. Okay, so basically, Marion is saying that she's gonna run a stall. Agnes was kind of opposed to it at first, but she gives in, and then it cuts to the Russells and Miss. I explained in my last video how I have a very big problem with a lot of the dresses that she wears. Okay, let me. Okay, let me try and play. Yeah, that dress. Now I expressed my distaste with a lot of her dresses in my last video, but that one doesn't actually seem too bad. It's this really sort of white and gold. It actually matches her like her decor for her house. Her house is like really white and gold. So I mean, it's not that bad. It's not as bad as a lot of the other dresses that she went with. I like the color scheme, and that was the problem with a lot of her other dresses was the color scheme. That mustard yellow with the silver, oh god, and that pinkish crap with again the silver. It was terrible. So I like the white and gold. I feel as though the embroidery is it's not actually that much because it's most of the dress. It actually accents it really well. But that's not something that I would wear around my freaking house. Like that's I feel as though that's too like who is she trying to impress here? The banisters, like who is she trying to impress? The walls, the embroider, the freaking the drapes. Like, so yeah, I feel as though it's a bit much just for around the house, Like, if she's literally just sitting there writing letters or something, writing invitations to people that won't come to her parties. So yeah, I thought that was a bit much. I didn't have too much of a problem with the dress. It's just the occasion that she's wearing it on, because there's no occasion. But I mean, I don't know. Again, I feel as though she's always trying too hard. I feel like that's like part of her character, honestly, is the fact that she's really trying to get into high society. So, yeah, whatever. Again, I like the dress, just not the occasion. If she would have worn that to her little soiree, which still failed, so it wouldn't have really mattered. But still, that would have been better than what she's worn when she goes out in public. Like her private dresses that she wears just around the house are like, they're usually pretty good. They're usually not that bad. It's when she goes out into public and when she's trying too hard, that is when she just goes way too over the top and just wears these terrible clothes. Like honestly, like a lot of stuff she wears is just awful. So okay, and then it cuts to one of the women who ran the charity. How Mr. Russell mentioned that her husband was an alderman, and so it cuts to the alderman. He's saying how okay they invited them to dinner, you know, and not only that, but they said that or no, I'm getting ahead of myself there, but basically she's saying that like one of the women who ran the charity, her husband is an alderman, and I explained in my last video that I have no idea what an alderman is. All I know is that he's in charge of something in a town, and that Mr. Russell needs his approval and the other aldermen's approval to build his railroad. So Mr. Russell asked them to go to a party, like to go to a nice informal party so we could talk to them. And what was it? Basically, the alderman was saying to his wife, who ran the charity, and remember, the charity are the people that sort of snubbed Mrs. Russell. So she's saying that, oh, we can't go to that party. You know, it wouldn't be that. They're the new money, basically. You know, the people that run the charity, they're also the old money. So the people that the Russells, again, they're the new money. So basically, his wife was telling him, we can't go there. We're not going to go meet the Russells. And the husband, the alderman, he was telling her, like, we don't want to upset Mr. Russell. Like, I don't want to mess with that dude. Because apparently, even now, he has a real reputation. He's starting to get a reputation as like a cutthroat businessman who's not going to take he's not going to take no for an answer. It's either yes, or I'm going to ruin your business, just like he did with the other guy. So, that was that whole conversation. Basically, the alderman was telling his wife, like, we're going to go to that party. Or we're not a party. It was just like a little meeting between like a little dinner get together between the four of them. So he's basically saying, like, we're gonna go to that because I don't want to piss this guy off. And then it cuts back to Agnes and Ada. I love those two. I love the odd couple vibe of them. And Ada is asking if Oscar can introduce Marion to some of his friends. And then, Agnes is just like, well, he doesn't really know like that many people, and they might not be interested. And then Ada goes, well, unless Oscar's taking a shine to her. And Agnes gets offended super quick. She's like, what do you mean taking a shine to her? They're first cousins, and she has no money. But Ada, she's no dummy. She knows that, like, she saw, because again, like I said, my first video in my first review, the episode of my review of the first episode. As soon as Oscar saw her, he was like, "Oh, hello. Should we kiss? We are cousins after all. Like kiss hello. Let's kiss hello." Because I guess that's what they kind of did back then. I don't know. But but Agnes is not having it. She's like, no, you don't know what you're talking about. And then it cuts to the Russell house, but it's the chef and It's the chef and the housekeeper. And the chef is basically talking to the housekeeper. He's saying like, "Oh, you're doing such a great job." Oh, he is French. I had a problem with that in my last video. I didn't know if he was French or Italian or what, but no, he's French. Okay, so the chef is just like, oh, you're making. He's basically talking to the housekeeper like, oh, how did you get in this position? You know, how did you get to this place, this job? Ooh, tough to navigate. But okay, basically he's asking her how she got to where she is in life. And she's saying how like, oh, my mom answered this ad for a kitchen maid, and here I am. And he's just like, oh, you've worked your way up. Oh, by the way, I'm a quarter French, so I can do this. But so I can do French accents. But Jesus. Okay. And so after they have a little flirt, and then it cuts to all of the women from the charity. Like, you got all these women from the charity, and they're all just sitting there talking about this and that, how much they need money. And then Marion, she's like, oh, well, what about Mrs. Russell? She has money. And all of the women literally stop. You could hear a pin drop. And they're all just like, the women who run the charity, they're just like, oh, well, she's, what was it? We don't want, we don't want to accept her into our thing. And Marion's just like, oh, even though she has money, it's like, oh, you'll accept her money, but you won't accept her. And then the other woman, whose husband is the alderman, they're, at his house, and basically like, that woman there is the alderman's husband. That's the alderman. And basically she's saying how like, oh, we got invited to dine at the Russell's house, and we're gonna go, eat with them, but it doesn't mean we like them. And then the other charity woman is just like, oh, you're gonna go eat with them. She literally is like, you're gonna go dine with them? Like, you're in their house? Like, you're gonna go eat with them in their house? And she's just like, well, yeah, well, it's the, this or that. It's the courteous thing to do. And so basically she's just like, oh yeah, we're gonna go eat with her. And the alderman is like, hey, I hear y'all talking about me. And you're gonna go, he's basically saying like, hey, we're gonna go eat there. And he says that like, hey, we're gonna, yeah, we're gonna go over there. And he says something. And the alderman asks, are you going to include Mrs. Russell among your stockholders? And one of the women who runs the charity, the other woman who runs the charity, the one who came to the party but only stayed there for a minute and got kicked out, as I said in my last video, that woman there, she is like, well, apparently not. And then Marion goes, yeah, we'll take her check, but we'll have to insult her first. Because they plan to turn her down and to not like listen to her or like, and accept her into society at all. But they still want her money, Okay, and then it cuts to the Van Rhijn house, and here's the cook stealing silver. She's stealing silver out of the silver cabinet to try and pay off her debt or whatever. And then Peggy, Miss Scott, whatever, she walks up and sees that the guy, the debt collector, whatever, he's not accepting. He kind of throws her to the ground. Like, literally, he sort of like throws her to the ground. Like, you see her like on the ground right there. And he's like, no, we're not going to accept this silver. We want money. We want cash. So Peggy comes up and she's just like, "Hey, what's going on? What's happening?" So you see it right there. Like he just sort of tossed it all to the ground. She had it all in this napkin and stuff, and he just tossed it and was like, "Money, this and that." So Peggy comes up and she's like, "Hey, Miss B." Again, I forget her name, or I don't know. I don't know her name. She's like, "Miss B," and Miss B is just like, "Hey, tell all those people watching to go away and stuff." So Peggy, she asks her, what's wrong? What's going on? You know? And so Miss B, the cook, she asks her, she eventually tells her, which makes sense because I'm sure that Peggy has dealt with far worse prejudice than Miss B could ever imagine. So she's used to being in like a position of disdain, you know, because that's what Miss B is worried about. She's worried that people are going to find out that she owes money to these people and that people are going to look down on her. So obviously, Peggy is going to understand, you know, people looking down on you. She comes from massive, she has a lot of experience in that territory. So she's obviously going to empathize with Miss B. And okay, so after that little spat, it cuts to the Russell house, and Miss Turner, the lady's maid who was eyeing Mr. Russell in the first episode, she's sort of putting up Miss Russell's stuff, and then Mr. Russell comes in, and they have a sort of little chat about something. And then Miss Turner, she puts her hand on his arm. Whew. Flirting, 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 and Mr. Russell is just kind of whatever. He again, he's either oblivious or just doesn't care. But and they walk out, and then it cuts again to the Vans, and Marion, she's having tea with the lawyer, but Aunt Agnes isn't very happy because the lawyer is a lawyer, and she doesn't like that because again, new money, and they don't like new money. People who have been wealthy don't like people who've gotten wealthy in this show. And then Oscar shows up like out of nowhere, and he's got Larry Russell with him of the, and Aunt Agnes is pissed because she doesn't like the Russells and she doesn't want them in their house. But he just, Oscar just ran into him randomly. So he's just standing there, Larry Russell. And then the banker introduces himself, this and that. Him and Larry Russell and Marion have a bit of a chat for a second about how they know each other and they met at the party, and then it cuts again. The show cuts a lot back and forth because there's two there's like six different stories going on right now. I love it. And it cuts to downstairs back with Mrs. B and Peggy, and they're talking about how we don't want it to get out. And the maid comes down and is like, what don't you want to get out? Y'all have a secret and this and that. And remember, the maid was prejudiced against Peggy at first. But Mrs. B, she's like, go ahead and tell her, you know. And I love this because since the cook, I feel like, the cook is, she kind of puts her arm on Peggy, and she's like, go ahead and tell her, my shame couldn't be worse. And then she, Mrs. B runs off and leaving Peggy to talk to the maid. And I feel like that's kind of like the maid is going to look at that and see like, okay, this woman who is my boss and who has been teaching me to like cook and kind of looks after me and stuff, she has no problem with black people. So it's like maybe I'm wrong. I'm hoping I'm wondering, well, is that where they're gonna go with this? Like maybe young this young woman realize that her prejudice is wrong. So maybe that's where they're going with it. But the last you really see is Peggy, walking up, and then that's the end of it. And I'm sure she tells her about Mrs. Van Ryn's, Mrs. B's story, and apparently Mrs. B was gambling. She had a big gambling debt, and that's why. And then it cuts back upstairs to Marion and the lawyer. Uh, they're sitting upstairs talking, and they're talking for a minute. So that old old big guy's over there. He's the first footman or the under butler or whatever. He's got to leave because he's like, okay, they're talking too long. I'm not supposed to be here. So he walks off, and they're sitting there talking about, whatever, maybe meeting up again. And the lawyer says that he'd been wanting to move up to New York, but maybe now he had a reason. And Peggy had wanted to speak to him. She'd wanted to speak to a lawyer for some reason. Uh, Again, that hasn't been. I'm not sure what it is, but Mrs. Brooks, Marion, she asks the lawyer, if he'll speak with Peggy, and she warns him like, hey, she's a black woman, and he's like, oh well, I'm intrigued, let me help, because she was asking for someone who Peggy was asking for someone specifically who was aware of Pennsylvania law and stuff like that. So again, I'm not again I expressed this in my last video. I'm not sure what her dad did or what she did, but there's something going on with her backstory. And apparently, I might have been wrong in my last video when I said that I don't think that her backstory will affect what's going on now. So maybe it will. Maybe there is something big that happened in her past, that might affect her livelihood in this big manor house, So now they got me interested now. Now I'm like, okay, what happened? What did happen with her dad and all that? Okay, so then it cuts up to Agnes being upset at Oscar because he brought in Russell, or Mr. Russell, Larry Russell, and she doesn't want the Russells in her house. And basically Oscar's saying like, hey, I met him at the place, I saw him on the road, invited him in. Not only that, but Oscar has a thing for the Russell's daughter, Gladys. And okay, so it sits up to Agnes, and she's arguing about how the Russells. Okay, Marion comes in, and Agnes asks her, "Have has the lawyer left?" And Marion is like, "Yes, he has. Uh, he's thinking of moving up to New York." And Agnes goes, Agnes is saying that if he does, he's not going to be welcome here. And she's like, well, why not? He goes, because New York is a collection of tribes. And Oscar says that the Russells are part of your tribe. They live across the street. I could hit their window with a rock. And uh, Agnes is like, don't tease me. And um, Oscar says, I'm not teasing you. I'm simply stating facts. And then Agnes goes, I'm not concerned with facts. Not if they interfere with my beliefs. And then Oscar goes, I gave you prejudice in a nutshell. I love Oscar. He's awesome. I know I said in my last video that like he looked funny and like he looks like Freddie Mercury. But one, that's not an insult. And two, I think he's awesome, especially in this episode. Like, I think he's bi. It's great because, again, I think I've mentioned I'm curious to see how he's gonna duck and weave this freaking game that he's playing. Like, how are you gonna pull that off, dude? Uh, so yeah, and then it comes to I'm done again. Oh yeah, Agnes. Agnes is like, I'm going up to change, and Oscar's just like, yeah, I don't think you are. I think you're just avoiding. He basically is just like, I think you're avoiding the conversation. I wouldn't be surprised if you came down and weren't changed at all. Okay, so then it cuts out to the uh, the charity woman and the alderman. They're coming to the party now. I'm gonna have to do it for her because I did it for everybody else. I do not care for this charity woman's dress. It's not as bad or as gaudy as okay. So here we go. Here's her dress. At first, I didn't really care for it. I'm not gonna lie. It was the collar. I'm gonna show you in a sec. She has this collar on her dress. The red and everything. It was really just the collar. That was it. Just that collar that I disagreed with. The red sort of velvet, and she has the same sort of embroidery on her sleeve, like on the end of her sleeve. So it sort of matches well. And I love this scene between the alderman, the wife, and like Mrs. Rose, because it's basically just them being super pet, like just the women being super petty and the men giving everybody looks to each other. Because the charity woman, she's all like, "Oh, who built this house? You didn't get someone to build it in. You didn't get the because all of the people there, they all use the same architect. All of the people like on that street, all the Van Rhines and all the old money, they all use the same architect. So she was basically like, "Oh, you didn't use the same architect, and Miss Russell was like, "No, I mean, find it hard to make a house your own unless it was built for you." Like she asked, why didn't you pick the guy that why didn't you pick Mr. Morris Hunt, the guy who did everybody else's house? And she was like, "Oh, Mr. White seems super unafraid." That's actually the architect's name who made the Russell's house, Mr. White. She was like, "Oh, he seems very unafraid." And then the charity woman's like, "Oh yeah, he seems very unafraid to decorate," saying that their house is like super like decorative and perhaps a bit gaudy, which it kind of is. It's a bit maybe over the top. Again, I've said so much that she's Mrs. Russell is very like overcompensating. But oh, and the charity woman says that they're gonna hold the bazaar in the armory, whatever that is. I mean, I know what an armory is, but I don't know what like it is for them. Apparently, it's some like building. I don't know. Whatever. So basically, they're gonna hold it in some other building. And Mrs. Russell says, "Well, if that doesn't work out, you can hold it here in our ballroom because we have this super nice ballroom." To which, the charity woman's just like, "Yeah, sure, I'm sure we will." And oh, the charity woman, her name is Morris, I think. Like their name is Morris. And the architect who built all the old money's house, who she's like, "Hey, why didn't you get Mr. Morris Hunt?" You know, she Mrs. Russell asks, "Hey, is Mr. Morris Hunt a relation?" And Miss Morris is like, "No, it's not." And then Miss Russell is like, oh, well, it must just be I guess Morris just is a common name. Again, saying like, oh, you're just common. I just love like the back and forth between the two of them. And then the husband, the husband alderman, he tries to break it up by saying, oh, this food really is delicious. And Miss Russell is like, "Oh, thank you. I'll tell Bodin, whatever. I think that's his name. That you'll be happy. I'll tell Bodin or whatever. He'll be delighted." And then the charity woman is like, "Oh, your chef is French." And Miss Russell's like, "Oh, isn't everyone's anyone days?" And they're basically going back and forth with the charity woman saying like, "Oh, it's such a luxury, to have such a French cook. It's so overpriced." And Miss Russell is just saying, "Oh, we don't care. We're rich." She's just like, "Oh, we don't care. We're rich." And then Mr. Russell offers to. That's when Mr. Russell offers to host in the ballroom if anything goes wrong with the armory. And Mr. Or the charity woman, she says something about like it can be hard to make your way in New York high society. And then Miss Russell is just like, "Oh, really? Can it? Oh, we haven't noticed." Which is funny because she was like literally left crying in bed at the end of the last episode. She's just putting on a brave face. And then that's when the women go and check out the ballroom, and Miss Russell is like, "Oh, if anything goes wrong," that's when she's like, "Hey, if anything goes wrong with the bazaar, you know, the offer still stands. If you want to come here, you can." And then the charity woman is like, "Oh, that's very generous, Miss Russell. I almost wish we could." She literally says that. It's just like, oh my God, you're being such, like so hoity-toity. Uh, oh man. So then it cuts to um, Marion and Peggy. They're talking about Peggy told Marion that the cook is like, she needs money. And it turns out that she needs $50, which is actually quite a lot of money back then. Like $50, that was nothing to scoff at back then. That was probably like a few $100s by today's standards, if not more. I'm not sure. I don't even know what the hell inflation means, really. Okay, that's a lie. I know what it means. Kinda. Not important. The point is that the cook owes $50, and Marion is basically just like, well, I only have 30. 30. So they start talking, and then Agnes comes in with a huge box of letters to hand to Peggy. And she's like, "Hey, I need you to answer these." Huh. She goes, "Hey, I need you to answer all of these letters and stuff. You know, I'm like, it's like a big box of letters." And she's like, "These are all from like presidents and, famous people and all this and that. I need you to answer them." So Peggy's just like, "Okay, I'll do it." And just, I'm ready. I'm willing to work, basically. And then it cuts back to Mr. Russell and the alderman. And Mr. Russell's basically telling him, like, "Hey, I want to build this railroad." Ugh. But he needs the alderman's permission to build a station in the city. So the alderman put it in. The alderman is basically like, "Okay, I'm cool with that. I get where you're coming from, but all the other aldermen, they don't like you because you're new money." Again, it comes down to new money. And Mr. Russell basically tells him like, "Hey, buy shares in my company and then pass the law and tell them all to buy shares in my company." It's kind of like insider trading or whatever. He's just basically like, my company is going to do big if this law passes. So buy shares in my company and then pass the law. And, oh, man, keep yawning. And the alderman is basically like, so you're telling me to buy shares in your company and then pass the law? And Mr. Russell's like, no, I'm not telling you that at all. Even though he totally is. So like I said before, Russell's like, he's a cutthroat businessman. He knows what's up. And then him and his wife, she comes in and they have a good kiss because they're winning now. Like now they got the upper hand, kinda. And then the butler comes down. He tells the cook and the housekeeper, that they did a good job. The cook flirts with the housekeeper a little bit more, seeing some sparks between them. Oh, I love it, a little bit of intrigue. Oh yeah. And then Agnes calls Ada into her room, and she tells her to stop encouraging her with a lawyer. Like basically, stop saying that it's okay that Marion can be with a lawyer. And don't and she Agnes says this funny there's this funny moment where Ada is like, well, what's gonna happen to me when you're gone? And Agnes is literally like, oh please, you'll die before me. Something like that, basically. Like it's like, whoa. And Ada's just like, but yeah, the two of them have this sort of interesting moment when she calls her into her room and they have a good talk. And she says that Agnes has this moment of less strictness, let's say, where she says that she doesn't want Marion to marry for money. She wants her to marry, someone who will give her some affection. She wants her to be happy. And then it goes to Marion and Peggy. They're going down to, oh man, can I get rid of these yawns? They're going down to this fountain in New York to meet the lawyer or whatever. And okay, they go ahead and they meet up with the lawyer, Peggy, and what's her name? Peggy and the lawyer. They walk off, and then Mary up with Gladys, who is with the lady's maid. And Gladys has this big problem of having the wrong colored sash thing, whatever you call that thing that goes over her hat, that little scarf thing. She always has sort of the wrong colored thing. I feel like that's her mother. Like right before Gladys walks out the door, her mother just grabs this terrible scarf and is like, "Here, wear this. You can't look attractive." Like, but so they have her and Marion have a nice little talk about you know oh, they talk about how Larry was at their house and how Gladys doesn't think, she's like, oh well, I don't think he'll be at your house again sometime soon. And they talk about how the rules of high society, because Gladys is very, like, her mother is super controlling. Back then, like, if you were a woman in high society, your mother's word was literally like the law. And they, whatever they said, you had to do. Which is why it was so interesting to see Marion sneak out in the first episode. So then, the lawyer comes back and he talks with Marion, saying about how he's planning on moving to New York and this and that. And she says, like, oh, you'd have much to offer to New York. And he's like, well, but what would I have to offer New York? Or no, something. She says, like, New York has a lot to offer. And then he's like, but what would I have to offer to New York? Basically saying that, like, he understands that he's new money and that a lot of high society people are not going to like him. And then Peggy comes back in, but she stays downstairs, because she is technically staff. And then the old white lady, I'm going to have to learn her name at some point. The prejudiced white lady, she's like, hey, she sees Peggy come in, and she's like, hey, what are you doing? And Peggy's just like, oh, we were meeting Bethesda Fountain. That's where they were at, Bethesda Fountain. Not Bethesda. But, so the housekeeper is, kind of like, railing her, kind of like, hey, so what were you doing there? What were you, why were you there? Why were you out with Peggy, And, why were you out with Miss Marion? And Peggy's just like, oh, we were there to meet Mr. Rakes. That's the lawyer's name, Mr. Rakes. I think that's how you say it. And, she said we, but, she kind of slipped up because she wasn't supposed to say that they were both meeting him or whatever. And so the housekeeper kind of starts to grill her like, oh, what do you mean we? Why'd you say we? And then the cook stands up for Mrs. B, because Peggy's on her side. Peggy stood up for her. So Mrs. B is just like, why don't you just leave her alone? It's none of your business, And the housekeeper is just like, oh, I was just asking. And Mrs. B is just like, well, don't. And that's the end of that. And then they cut to upstairs, and Marion sees Oscar, and Marion comes into him, and she sits down and she asks him, like, hey, she tells him the story of Miss B and how she needs money, and they sit down and have a little conversation about how Marion wants money from him. She's like, hey, can you lend me $50? And Gary is basically like, okay, I will. But you have to set up a dinner party. And you have to invite the Russells. And you have to invite the Russell daughter. Because he's got a thing for the Russell daughter, I can tell. And then it cuts to, that's a bit later. But it cuts to Mr. Russell. He's coming out of his bank. And then the alderman pops in. The alderman, like, comes into his carriage. He's already in his carriage. And they're riding around in the carriage talking about, like, the alderman basically tells him that, he's on board and all the other aldermen are. But they're not going to give that much. Or, some of them might not give it all because they're really snobbish. And again, he's new money. So, they have that little chat, and then Mr. Russell lets him out of the carriage. And the alderman sort of walks off. And then it cuts back to Oscar and Marion. So many names in this show. And it's basically them talking about how, what I just said, how she wants the money from him. And then it cuts to the alderman and his wife. And the alderman is telling his wife, he's asking his wife, like, hey, what happened to the armory? And his wife's like, oh, that fell through, so we're going to have to go to the hotel on 5th Avenue. And the alderman's like, but you were offered the Russell's ballroom. Why don't you do that? Take the Russell's ballroom. And the wife's just like, oh, no, we're not going to do that. And basically the alderman is saying, like, hey, take the Russell's house. I don't want to upset Mr. Russell. And the wife, the who runs the charity, she's just like, oh, it's too late. You're too late. It doesn't matter. She doesn't get, like, they don't get how dangerous Mr. Russell is, but they will. We'll get to that by the end of the episode. Okay, so then it cuts to Ada. Ada is coming into Marion's room at night, and Ada basically says, like, she literally says, hey, why didn't you come to me for the money? And Marion's like, how did you know? And so Ada tells her that she kind of grilled Oscar, and Oscar eventually told her. And so, Ada is just, again, Ada's the nice one. She's just saying, hey, next time come to me. You didn't Bauer, Mrs. Bauer. That's her name, Bauer. Okay, Mrs. Bauer. Bauer, Bauer, Bauer. That's her name. That's the cook's name, Mrs. Bauer. Okay, so she's just like, hey, I'll pay. She says that I paid it off. So now Marion doesn't have to host the lunch party, and invite Gladys. And then they have a little talk about how Ada didn't hate Marion's father. Ada was the baby, and Marion's father always kind of joked around with her and stuff like that. And then she asks about Mr. Rakes, how's that doing, the lawyer? You know. And then it cuts to Mrs. Russell, and she sees in the newspaper that the charity bazaar is to be moved from the armory to the hotel. And she sees that, and she's like, even though she offered to host it at her house, she sees that they said screw it. They're gonna pay, because they'd have to pay to host it at the hotel. The wife didn't say that. I forgot to mention that earlier. Like, they have to pay for the hotel, and that'll cut into their profits as a charity. But she is offering to host it at her house for free. So sees that the charity bazaar is moved, and she's like, yeah. So she is pissed. And and then it opens up on the bazaar. They have all these nice little things. They have all these little. They're selling all these sort of knickknacks, gloves, handkerchiefs, pocket watches, goggles, hats. It's a little marketplace, fans, all sorts of stuff. They're selling everything. It's for war widows and orphans. Charitable cause, nice cause. And what's her name? Marion. She's running the little handkerchief uh, stall, little market, whatever. Yeah, handkerchief stall. And the charity woman comes up to her, and she's like, this or that. Are you ready to run it? And we finally get to see Mrs. Astor. She was the woman from the end of the first episode who burnt the invitation to the Russells. To the Russells party. She's the one who burnt the invitation to the Russells party. That's Mrs. Astor. Maybe they mentioned that in the first episode. I didn't catch it, but they keep talking about her. They always mention Mrs. Astor. She's the one who is like the gateway into high society. So they have her open the bazaar. She comes out and gives a little speech like, "Hey, the bazaar is now open." And then we see, not only do we get to see her, but we see Mrs. Augustus Chamberlain. And her outfit isn't too bad. It goes with her hat. It's a bit over the top, but apparently, she's a pariah anyway. I like hers. I like the black, the white, as opposed to the other ones, white against black. Like, I like that. Like, hers isn't too bad. It's honestly a bit tiny. Like, she's got these orange feathers in her hair and stuff. Like, yeah. So I like hers. Hers isn't too bad. Because it's not, the color scheme is good enough. It's good. It works. And so she's being super nice to Marion and buying some handkerchiefs or whatever. She even like gives her a massive tip or whatever. And oh, and then Agnes comes in, and Agnes is just like, "Why were you talking to that woman?" And Marion, she's like, "Oh, I was just selling her handkerchiefs." And Agnes basically says that Miss Chamberlain has done terrible things in her past, and I don't. Again, I'm curious as to what she did. What did Miss Chamberlain do that made her such a pariah of these people, you know, and yet still is like walking around their charities. And then, oh man, Miss Russell comes in another terrible dress. But I think Miss Chamberlain was either like she must run a brothel or like own slaves or something. And okay, here comes. She's literally wearing peacock feathers. Like, oh my. And now that dress actually isn't that bad. It honestly isn't. But the fact that she's literally wearing peacock feathers, I mean, come on. Again, trying too hard. These people don't give a damn. Oscar comes up to Marion, and that's when she tells him, like, hey, Ada. Sorry, I'm trying to fix this fucking bucket. And that's when Ada tells him, Marion tells him that Ada is going to pay off the debt, so she doesn't have to host the party anymore. And then he's like, oh, so I'd better go and talk to Gladys because, hey, how about that? Miss Russell brought Gladys to the party too. So he goes up there and he tries talking to her, but oh, Miss Russell's not having any of it. you know, he's just like, hey, I want to, I don't really know your daughter. We met at, this one time. And I don't really know her that well. And Miss Russell's just like, oh, well, I don't think you really will. And then, oh, that is when you get Mr. Russell looking around. And he's pissed because he told, he loves his wife. And he's pissed that they decided to hold this charity in the hotel and not in in their house. So he walks up to the charity woman and he's like, "Oh, hello, good morning, good morning." Oh, and then I don't understand. Well, you will. And he asks her, "Is your husband here? I would have liked to have spoken with him." Oh, he asks, "Is your husband here?" The alderman, and she's like, "Oh, uh, he was hoping to look in later." And then Mr. Russell goes, "Oh, well then he may miss it." She's like, "I don't understand." And he goes, "You may." And he goes off on him. He's like, "So you you decided to hold your charity in this place instead of my wife's ballroom, which was offered to you." He's literally like, "So the pair of you decided that my wife's ballroom was not good enough." And then they're like, we don't. And before they can even finish, he walks over to the first stall and he's like, "Hey, how much?" And he starts reaching into his jacket and he's like, "Hey, how much were you supposed to, the bazaar, the market or whatever? It was going to last 3 days." So he walks up to this woman and he's like, "Hey, how much were you hoping to make in these 3 days?" And she goes, "About $30, $40, or even $40. She was like, maybe $30 or even $40. And he goes, "Here's 100. But he literally takes, "Here's $100. But there's one condition. You need to pack up your stall and move it to my wife's house." And she's like, "Oh, of course, yeah." And then He goes to the next stall and goes, here's $100. Pack up your stall and go to my wife's house. And the next stall, and the next stall, and the next stall. And he closes down their charity market. He closes it down and moves it to their house. He said, he said, I'm buying everything here, but you have to move it to my house. That's literally what he's telling people. And then his wife is just like, oh, she's smiling, so happy. He is ruining their entire charity event. And then one of the charity women, they walk up to her and they're like, hey, stop this. He's ruining the bazaar. And she's like, why? He's donating to charity. And the charity woman goes, Mrs. Russell, the people you are trying to impress will not be impressed by this. And Mrs. Russell goes, no, she goes, this type of stunt does not impress the people that you are trying to impress. And then Mrs. Russell goes, this type of stunt impresses everyone. Because this dude literally went around, bought everything in their market and said, pack it all up, move it to my house. We're holding this thing at my place. It's like he went to a party. It was like he went to a bar, bought everything on the shelf, and said, pack it all up. We're moving this to my place. That is literally what he did. And like, oh my God. Look at the reaction. Like, he says, your party is over. You're to be congratulated. It's been a great success. And now it's time to go home. Are you ready, my dear? And then they walk off, having won the freaking day with their new money. Oh man, I love this show. And then they walk off, having completely won the day. And then Mrs. Astor, she starts walking off, and then one of the charity people's like, oh, Mrs. Astor, aren't you gonna stay? And she's just like, stay for what? The party's over. They won. And then even Aunt Agnes walks out, and she's like, it seems the ship is sinking. It's time to leave. Like, oh, I fucking love the Russells. Mr. Russell is awesome. He freaking bought out a charity event and said, pack it all up. We're taking this thing to my place. Who the fuck does that? God, I love this dude. That he's just sitting in his carriage is like, I think they learned their lesson. Like, they're not going to forget us. Ooh. And then someone asks Mrs. Astor. She's like, I thought she sees Mrs. Astor coming home, and she's like, hey, what happened? I thought you were going to the charity bazaar. And she was like, it was closed up by Mr. Russell. She's like, Mr. Russell? Who is he? And she goes, yesterday I would have said he was nobody, but now I'd say he was not someone to be trifled with, or something like that. What was it with I'm obliged to be concerned that he is not what was he like? Well, yesterday I would have said he was nobody, but today I'm obliged to concede that he is someone to be reckoned with. And it's like, hell yeah. And befriended? Oh no, not at any rate. Oh, she still doesn't want to be his friend. But she said, but we will hear of him again. Oh yeah, he bought up a charity event and said, pack it up, we're moving to my place. Oh man, new money, man. Okay. So that's the end of the second episode. It ends with Mrs. Astor walking up her thing. Again, I think she's connected to the Roosevelts. She's apparently really important in the town, like really important in New York. Okay, so that's the end of the episode. What do I think of it? I love it. I still love it. Absolutely incredible. I re-evaluated my opinion of Peggy's backstory, now I'm getting a bit more interested. Like, okay, she needs a lawyer for something. What's going on? What's happening? What happened? I'm a bit more interested in that. Uh, the Mrs. Turner, the lady's maid, she's starting to, get a bit touchy feely with Mr. Russell. I'm interested to see where that goes. I think she's gonna overstep her bounds because I don't think Mr. Russell is gonna I don't think he's gonna betray his wife. He doesn't seem like that type of dude. He seems like a very devoted husband who just spent probably $1,000 just to mess up someone else's charity event to help his wife. Like, I don't think he's gonna cheat on her with some freaking lady's maid who's not as attractive as his wife, honestly. But so yeah, I, that's where I think that's going. I think she's gonna overstep her bounds and get shot down and probably fired, and then they're gonna have to bring in a new lady's maid. So yeah, that's where I think that's going. Peggy, they didn't show her write anything. They started to show her, or they showed her start writing at the very end of the first episode, but we didn't see that go anywhere in this episode. I think this was mainly focused on just sort of getting a bit of intrigue into her and a bit more on the Russells and their whole, uh, just how they're doing everything. Um, and Agnes, again, she's mostly the gatekeeper. We haven't really seen much of her aside from being the sort of snobby, uptail woman. Uh, Ada, she's still just sort of the nice aunt. She's just sort of the nice one. I feel like that's just sort of going to be, I don't feel as though there's a whole lot to tell with them except for what's already been established. I could be wrong. They could develop a lot more. We could see more of them and more of a bit more fleshing out with them. But I feel as though they're already who they are. There's not much more to really work with those characters except for what they already are. I still love the odd couple vibe of them. How Ada is this super upbeat, always up for new things, really happy woman, and then Agnes is this sort of really bitter, sort of strict, not so much bitter, but just sort of proper. She's always just, it's like even when she doesn't have her nose up, she always seems to have her nose up. But and then what was it? We didn't see a whole lot of the downstairs, except for, as I mentioned, at least not so much of the. Actually, no, we got a bit more fleshed out of the downstairs. We saw that Mrs. Bauer, whose name I learned, she is she gambles. She has a gambling addiction and a bad debt with some really bad people. So that's interesting. We might get to see that bit more fleshed out, or maybe a little bit more of that. And apparently, the maid. Again, I spoke about this. I think that the maid might find a bit more respect for Peggy since Mrs. Bauer seemed to have a bit of respect for her. I'm not sure if that'll, I'm not sure what the maid's relationship to Mrs. Bauer is. I know that they work together and that she works under her, but I'm not sure if they have this sort of like teacher student, sort of mentor kind of relationship. I don't know what the maid's relationship with Mrs. Bauer is. So I'm not sure if the fact that Mrs. Bauer confided in Peggy is going to change the maid's view of Peggy. I'm not sure. I'm going to have to wait and see more, get a bit more of the characters. John, I think that's what the under butler, the dude who I used in my last thumbnail. That dude, I think his name is John. We didn't see a whole lot of him. He he didn't really have much. He didn't. Again, not a whole lot of him. They spent a good bit of time on the cook or the chef, uh, who I found out was French. He is French. I'm gonna learn his name probably next episode, or maybe when I rewatch the first two. So he has a thing for the housekeeper, the lady housekeeper. Don't know her name either, but so I'm interested to see how that pans out. Pan. He's a chef, but so I'm interested to see how where that goes, and I think that was really all. Oh, Oscar. As I said, I think he's showing an interest in Gladys. So I don't think he's gay. I think he's bisexual, which as I mentioned once or two or three times before, I'm gonna be really interested to see how he navigates, those waters at that time in that air, like in that area. I mean, even at that time, just being, you know, a gay person was really difficult, and they experienced a lot of prejudice. So I'm interested to see how he's going to navigate having someone who knows that he's gay, like Mr. Adams in the first episode, because he has a gay, sort of gay relationship with him. So I'm interested to see like how he's going to deal with that, and he obviously seems interested in Gladys Russell, the Russell's daughter. So I'm wondering, it might come down the line where he develops a relationship with Gladys, and then Mr. Adams might blackmail him or something or other. Or, so I'm interested to see how things pan out for him. I think it might be like he's a really interesting character, one of the more interesting characters in the show so far. Like I'm really interested to see where his story goes and how he like handles everything, especially since he's from such like he's from old New York, like such this rich family, you know. Um, what else was there? I think we saw a little bit of Larry. Yeah, we saw a little bit of Larry and Marion. So they, a little bit of maybe budding romance there. The lawyer, that's right, the lawyer is moving back to town. Might be moving into town. I said in the last video that I might have seen some sparks there. So good old Larry might have some competition. Agnes doesn't like the lawyer, but that might be in the lawyer's favor because Marion likes to go against Agnes, but she doesn't like Russell either. So and I love Marion's rebellious side. We didn't really see it this time around that much. I mean, she went out to help. Oh yeah, when she went to meet with the lawyer with Peggy for Peggy, she just said that she was going out on a walk with Peggy. I don't think I didn't mention that. Sorry. But so yeah, she lied to her aunts, saying, "Oh, I'm just gonna go out on a walk, and Peggy's gonna come with me." But really, they went to go meet up with the lawyer, and that's why when Peggy said that they went out to meet Mr. Rakes to their housekeeper, who's prejudiced of her, and was like railing her, she was kind of like, "Oh, damn!" Like I wasn't supposed to mention that, and that's why she kind of like changed the subject around stuff. But so yeah, so we're seeing the lawyer come back. We're seeing Marion's. Saw a little bit of Marion's rebellious side. We saw Miss Russell get back at the people. Oh man, she got back at those charity bitches so bad. She totally shut down their charity function. It was supposed to last for 3 days, and then Old dude, Mr. Russell comes in. He's like, "Here's $100. Pack up your stall, move it to my place. Here's $100. Pack up your stall, move it to my place. Here's $100. Pack up your stall." I swear to God, he must have spent at least $1,000, which is a freaking lot of money. That's like ten. That's probably like tens of thousands of dollars nowadays. Like, oh my God, just just to spite them. Just to spite them. That's what new money does. It straight up gives you the finger. So yeah, I can, just like last week, I cannot wait for next week. Oh man, I cannot wait for next episode. This show is it's good so far. It's great. I love it.